Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Hi, and welcome to Reloscope, the Relationship Science Insights podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week, we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I'm Marie Stella, your host from Melbourne, Australia. Let's start the show. Welcome back to the show. Codependency is a situation that's almost too easy to fall into, especially in romantic relationships. It's so cyclical. There's a lot of negotiation, renegotiation, and then coming back to it, to the same issues. But what can be done to break the cycle? To answer this question, we're picking the brain of Cynthia Flores, a therapist, coach, and speaker whose mission is to empower Black, Indigenous, and people of color to heal from past traumas, as well as guide them through their career and relationships. Hi, Cynthia. How are you doing today?
Hi. Thank you so much for having me. I'm doing great. I'm excited to talk about this.
Thank you so much for joining us today from San Francisco, the Bay Area, lovely area. Now tell us a bit about yourself and what self-worth means to you.
Of course. So as you mentioned, I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in the state of California, and I'm a coach and a speaker. And I've been doing this work for over 5 years. I've worked with a lot of clients who have come to me seeking help, right? Especially when navigating relationships, but navigating codependent relationships. And I really supported them in their healing journey, in understanding their experiences, and also understanding their self-worth. And for me personally, self-worth is really the beliefs and our core values about ourselves. It really comes from our self-concept and our ability to understand that our self-worth, our self-esteem is not defined by others. It's not defined by external material things, accomplishments. It's more around what we believe about ourselves. It comes from our core beliefs, right? Do we genuinely believe that we are worthy of love, worthy of care, worthy of having healthy relationships, right? Having these core beliefs that is okay and that is true, that our external experiences or adversities, they do not define that because we are inherently worthy. Yeah. So that is what self-worth means for me.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And tell me a bit about what the biggest obstacle is when your clients in codependent relationships come to you for help.
Well, some of the biggest obstacles, I would say that there's a relationship dynamic that starts from codependency is really a relationship dynamic that starts from past childhood experiences or adult relationship experiences. And what happens is that when someone with these relational patterns, say it's adversity or some form of trauma, either abandonment or rejection, either in their childhood or even in their adult relationships, is when they enter a relationship, they become really, there's this term called needy, right? Wanting to meet, wanting to make the other person their entire world. It's almost like this sense of like even self-abandoning to a point where there's no boundaries, right? There's lack of boundaries. There's challenges really prioritizing oneself. There's also this concept around becoming the healer, the fixer, the savior, right? When it comes to getting into relationships, those are sort of the patterns, right? that come up. And of course, it's very much associated with self-esteem and self-worth, because so when someone comes into a relationship, they with low self-worth or low self-esteem, they end up making the other person's behaviors or actions mean something about them. And therefore, somehow they associate their self-worth based on what other people are defining, what other people are doing, other people's actions and behaviors. And those are sort of the main challenges that come up, right, in codependent relationships.
That's a great preface for our topic for the day. And I'm really keen to learn more. But before we get started, we'd like to get to know you a bit better. This is Have You Met Cynthia Flores? My first question for you is, what do you like to do in your spare time?
I have 2 cats, so I'm a cat mom. I love hanging out with my cats. I love playing with them. And sometimes I take them out for hikes.
That's adorable. Oh,
Yes.
I wish I could take my cat out for a hike. Do you have them on like harnesses or like leashes?
Yes, definitely having to train them on harnesses and leashes, and then putting them in their own individual backpack. So of course, it's really about training them, and yeah.
How long did it take you to train them to get used to the harnesses and the outdoors?
I mean, I'm still training them.
Yeah.
It's a process.
Yeah, it is.
But honestly, I notice that now that I'm putting them in the harness while we're at home, doing a lot of positive reinforcement. It's all about behavior reinforcement, behavior training. But yes, taking them out, and now they just want to spend more time outdoors. And so, yeah. So that's one thing that I love.
I can only hope that I get the same with my own cats. But what breeds are your cats?
They're short hair. So I have a calico, and then I have a orange tabby.
Oh, orange tabby, female or male?
So orange tabby is a male, and then a female is a calico.
You've got a crazy one on your hands.
Yes. They love it. They love each other because they're from the same litter. So they're very much bonded.
Yeah.
They fight, but then they love each other.
That's too adorable. Does your orange tabby go crazy for food as well?
Oh my gosh. Yes. Do you have an orange tabby?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. So that's something that I've done a lot of research, and they're foodies, so they're very much food driven.
Yeah.
And yes, it's something that I think I need to be careful with that.
Yeah, I can no longer leave a loaf of bread outside on the counter or something, because too many times my orange tabby has like eaten through the plastic or something like that, or even with like disposable Tupperware. That's just how insane it is. But 2 cats, you must have a lot on your hands.
I do. I mean,
yeah. Do you find the time to do anything else, like watch films?
Yes, I love podcasts. I love anything that has to do with going to the gym, staying active. My podcasts, I love more like self-help, self-improvement. I think I'm really much into that because of my line of work.
Completely, yeah.
Yeah. When it comes to movies, I'm really into documentaries, and I really like the psychological thrillers. I like crime documentaries. Those are my favorite ones.
If you had to pick one crime documentary to recommend to someone who's never seen a crime documentary before and was never interested, which would you pick?
Okay, so that's a hard one. But I would say I just recently watched one that it's called The Darkness Within La Luz del Mundo, which is the light of the earth. And it's obviously in English, but I think the interviews were in Spanish. And I am very much interested in human behavior. So in analyzing and psychoanalyzing the people that do a lot of hurt and crimes, right? And a lot of that create a lot of suffering. So I think this documentary is pretty interesting and I highly recommend.
That does sound really interesting, and I might have to look it up myself at some point in time. I love crime documentaries as well, so I'm really looking forward to that. Thank you so much for answering our questions. I feel like we got to know you a bit better, and now we're moving on to the interview section. My first question for you is, what is a relationship, and how would you describe a relationship?
A relationship, I would describe it as a conscious commitment to be in a partnership, right? There are many forms of relationships. There are friendships, parent-child relationship, there are platonic relationships, there are romantic relationships. But I would say that the foundation of a relationship is really involves trust, it involves honesty, it involves vulnerability, it involves providing a sense of safety, a sense of feeling seen, valued, acknowledged. And I would say those are the main, that's the main foundation of a relationship.
And in your opinion, does a relationship, especially the romantic one, still hold the same meaning, structure, and importance as decades ago?
I would say so, yes. I think culturally and socially, we're seeing now that there's probably higher rates of divorce, higher rates of people not getting married. And then the divorce rate, for a person, for a first marriage is 67%. For a second marriage is 10% higher. And so it's higher than, for a second marriage. And I think socially and culturally, we're seeing that a lot of people are just, even though relationships, that's literally the foundation of human connection, of our survival, but also we want to be connected. We want to be seen. We want to be loved. That's a general need in our human nature. But what we're seeing is that I think in the work and the line that I do, I notice that it's very easy for people to end relationships because they don't want to do the inner work. Because relationships take work from both committed people. And I notice now that people do not want to take personal responsibility for their own stuff, their own experiences, their own patterns. They just feel like, okay, we're having problems, we're having issues, we can't resolve it, it's time to move on. And that's the reality that we're seeing, is that there's that, right? And there's that normalization that it's okay for you to just kind of move on to the next without the commitment to personal growth, but also the commitment to work through challenges in the relationship. And of course, there's certain relationships that certain people that shouldn't be in relationships, because it comes to a point where it becomes abusive and toxic. And those are, that requires still work individually, to work through some of these patterns, to work through some of these traumas individually before getting also in relationships. I do generally believe that you don't have to be fully healed and getting into a relationship. That's a myth. Yeah. But I do believe we do heal also in relationships. That's where the main of the work, the work comes in, is we're doing it individually, but also in a relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you said before about the motivations of not wanting to do the work, or should I say lack of motivation, that's probably pretty similar to why codependency happens. So how would you define codependency?
Right. So first and foremost, we all, as I mentioned, we are interdependent human beings. This is all part of our survival. We want to be loved. We want to be seen. We want to be valued. we heal, as I mentioned, in relationships. But I would say, how would I define codependency? And it's really more of a relational patterns that happen, when you engage in a relationship dynamic. And a lot of these patterns do come from adverse childhood experiences, either trauma in childhood or in adult relationships. And it's almost like, I like to describe it as a love addiction, right? And why do I describe it in that way? Because it's almost like being when someone becomes addicted to something, say a drug or a substance, or shopping or gambling, it's almost like you need to have it, and no matter what it is the dynamic, if there's any dysfunctional, toxic behaviors, disrespect, sometimes abuse, no matter what is the situation, that you want it, right? Because there's almost like this addiction. And I would say that, codependency, it's almost the need to have this sense of control, to fix, to putting yourself in this savior sort of the savior dynamic, and because of childhood wounds, either fear of abandonment, either fear of rejection, and it leads people to, in a way, abandon themselves, right? While they're hyper focused in the relationship, in someone in particular, in the other person. Mm-hmm. So that's how I would describe codependency.
That's a great way of putting it. And what would you say are the negative effects of codependency on romantic relationships?
Well, I would say that some of the negative effects are, when it comes to individually, it's like this sense of self-abandonment. It's almost like wanting to people please the other person, wanting to people please the partner, and completely abandon your own needs. It's really, when the codependency happens in a relationship dynamic, is the other person kind of becomes your world. So then any hobbies, any things that are important to you, they're just kind of, set aside. And also when it comes to, there's also this sense of wanting to control situations, because there's maybe a sense of not feeling safe enough in the relationship, but wanting that sense of control of the person needs to do this, having super high expectations, and realizing that those are quite realistic, right? So needing a lot of reassurance and validation from the partner, and also getting into the savior position, right, in the relationship, of having to do it all for the relationship, and difficulty also identifying their needs, their emotions, and difficulty communicating because of the fear of abandonment or rejection. Also, other things that I've seen is difficulty setting boundaries and even identifying their boundaries. Yeah. Because they're so hyper focused on not losing the other person, or making sure the other person is okay, that, we're putting ourselves aside, right? Or someone who is codependent on the side. Also, just being really much, so as I mentioned, relationship insecurity, really jealousy, or as I mentioned, lack of self-care, like not focusing on yourself, your hobbies. So those are some of the things the signs that come up with someone who has these codependency patterns.
Mm-hmm. There are a few things I do want to ask after you've just so in such detail outlined all of that for me. My first question is, how does it affect the overall health of the partnership? You did go through with us how it affects individuals within the relationship, but I'm keen to know, how does it affect the relationship as a whole? Yeah.
So some things that I've seen is that it affects it in a way that it creates ongoing conflict, difficulty differentiating. And that's a psychology term that when it comes to a partnership, there's almost like there's an enmeshment of lack of boundaries. So then almost like in a relationship, you become one where there's no boundaries on one side, there's no boundaries on the other one. So that's one of the things that has come up that I've noticed with clients. Also, a lot of enabling. And what does that look like? Say, and this is something that's very, very common with someone with codependency patterns, right? Is that they sometimes get into a relationship with someone who's really struggling with an addiction, okay? So this is any form of addiction, either gambling, either shopping, either addiction, like drugs or alcohol, okay? So someone gets into this relationship dynamic, and what they do is that they want to change the person. They're like, eventually, when they figure it out, it's going to be okay. He's going to change or she's going to change, and then everything's going to be okay. So it's almost like enabling the person with the addiction in the relationship. That happens a lot. And also enabling other behaviors that are potentially disrespectful, that create a greater sense of insecurity and unsafety in the relationship dynamic. Also, what I've noticed a lot is like the over-reliance, all relying on the other person to making decisions, and not taking initiative to make important decisions in their own life. Also self-abandoning. So sometimes in these relationship dynamics is the other person who's also trying to figure out how to have a healthier relationship dynamic is just sometimes sometimes they take advantage of the situation because the person struggles with setting boundaries, right? So, and also difficulty communicating. That's also another part.
Yeah, and you mentioned before that some things that can arise from codependency are unhealthy levels of expectations for like reassurance and over-reliance and things like that. So what is a healthy level of reassurance or reliance to expect in a healthy romantic relationship?
Well, when it comes to expectations, I think what's important is to really, when someone gets into a relationship, it's important to get to know the person, right? So if someone, say, is expecting the other person to not go to the gym or do their own self-care, and they want the partner to spend more time with them, and because they're not spending enough time with them because they're going to the gym or they're doing errands and doing their jobs or doing things that they need to do, there's almost an unrealistic expectation there of like, if my partner doesn't come spend time with me during the times that he's doing things or they're doing things, then that may mean that they don't love me. Mm-hmm. So that is in a way unrealistic. And the codependent person might be taking this as their behavior is meaning something about me. I'm not lovable. They don't love me. They don't care about me. I'm not deserving. I'm not loved. All of these stories and narratives that, people would tell themselves in these situations, or someone who is like in this constant anxiety about what the other person is doing, and almost like that control. So I would say that when it comes to expectations, is really much dependent on, the person, what the person is capable of or not, it's really understanding what are your needs, how can you also meet your needs, and understand that the other person might or might not meet those needs, but how can you also be self-reliant in certain things, right? Yes, communicate how you feel, what are your needs, and then figure out, is this something that, my partner is capable of doing? And if not, how can I, accept that?
And I suppose the sense of self-worth would really help in avoiding and overcoming codependency here. So what are some important practices to engage in order to maintain or find this sense of self-worth?
I would say really embark in your own healing journey, right? Embark in your ability to understand yourself either through therapy or other forms of healing that feel good for you. And because that's going to really help you in understanding who you are, your experiences, why you are the way that you are, why are you holding on to maybe these patterns? Where are these coming from? Because there's a root oftentimes to that. So how do I heal maybe that wound? How do I work through reframing these beliefs that I developed about myself, these limiting beliefs that I'm not lovable, that I'm not worthy, that I'm not enough, that other people's actions and behaviors have, mean that I'm not worthy and that I'm not beautiful enough or that nobody cares. So really embarking and asking those self-reflective questions about who am I and my worth and my value as a person, as an individual, has nothing to do with how other people define me or how other people behave towards me or how other people treat me. That this has more to do with how I see myself. And I would say that that's a big part of this process, this healing journey, this self-exploration, and really start questioning and challenging in a loving and compassionate way, right? Our core beliefs about ourselves, because they do come from somewhere and they do come from our own background and our own upbringing and experiences. And I would say really cultivating that self-compassion and self-kindness.
And on the other hand, for the partners who have identified that their partner is exhibiting these codependent behaviors, what can they do to address it in, a nice way?
I would say to really communicate, right? So engaging in dialogue and conversation and really coming from their own experience, right? Rather than blaming or shaming or name calling, like really being respectful and honest, but transparent, how they're noticing this relationship dynamic impact them, impact their relationship. And I would say definitely stating something like, I noticed that, I've noticed that these behaviors have been ongoing, and I just want to make sure that, I'm understanding where you're coming from. So really being empathic, but also setting boundaries, because oftentimes what I see is when the person who has codependent patterns, and I would say I wouldn't just blame this on one person, because this is a relationship dynamic, right? Everyone plays a role in this relationship, but really understanding that they all play a role in this dynamic. So how can this other person really bring this concern in a loving, caring, respectful way, but also setting boundaries? Because boundaries are also going to be helpful in protecting the relationship. And boundaries are not about pushing the other person away. Boundaries means that You want the person to be there with you, but that you want them to treat you a certain way, right? And I would say that that's a big part of it. It's really communicating, also engaging in couples therapy. That's been something that helps in understanding and seeing an outside perspective of what's going on inside in their dynamic.
And would it be useful at all for them to track the relationship's progress in overcoming codependency?
I think that when it comes to tracking that, I mean, it's not like you're like tallying, okay, check. But I would say that it's really about doing regular check-ins, right? When it comes to tracking, I always think about self-check-ins. It's like, how is each other feeling if they're triggered, right? Because I would say even codependency and these relationship pattern dynamics of enabling and people pleasing and not setting boundaries, it's relational. So it's really understanding for each person, what is coming up for me? Am I being triggered? What is it that's triggering me? How do I feel about this? How can I self-regulate and self-soothe before I respond? And then also coming together and saying, hey, I noticed that this is what's coming up for me. And maybe I need to set a boundary. Maybe I need to express a concern. Maybe I need to express this is what I need. I need maybe some reassurance or some support in navigating this. I need to feel safety. I need to feel safe in the relationship. So I would say when it comes to tracking, it's really about doing these regular check-ins and being okay with having dialogue and uncomfortable conversations, because I notice that that's one of the biggest challenges nowadays is how it's the challenge of people initiating difficult conversations.
And you mentioned before you did debunk a huge misconception about codependency, but are there any other relatively significant misconceptions that you think is important to address?
Yes, I would say that when I think about misconceptions, I like to think of them as archetypes, right? The archetype of the needy person, the archetype of the controller, the one that always wants things a certain way. And if things are not that way, then it's like the relationship is doomed. And then now it's like, it just spirals, right? Or the bossy person who wants things a certain way and going back to expectations, and also the savior, right? I think that these are some of the archetypes that the misconceptions of like, this is what the person is. But the reality is like deep down, it's really about healing trauma. It's healing trauma because working through a trauma-informed lens, what I've noticed that when there's codependency in relationship patterns or someone holds on to this codependency relationship dynamics is because somewhere in their childhood, in their upbringing, there was a sense of over-parentification. There was a sense of emotion. There was maybe emotional neglect where the parents either were always working or maybe they struggled with a mental health challenge, right? Anxiety, depression, or another situation that was really hard for them to be present. So then they took on that role, or there was, abuse or any form of trauma that had happened that had to do with abandonment or rejection. And that stayed with them, that marked them. So understanding it through that lens and also being in a relationship, in a healthy relationship where both, can talk about these things openly and being vulnerable, and rather than people's traumas be weaponized because that happens, rather than that, just be understanding, like, I see where that's coming from, and let's work together to help each other, right? Because that's what that's what happens. But it's really hard, right, to find people that are emotionally, right, mature, that are wanting to do that inner work. It's like, it just becomes like a baggage, and people struggle. People are like, this is a lot. And there's like,
and it's really important to recognize that during inner work is a lot of hard work. And if your partner isn't willing to do it, then they might not be the right one for you as well. And even during your own inner work is going to be a lot of hard work, and that's something that you just have to do to move forward. So what therapeutic approaches or self-help strategies have proven effective in helping individuals and couples overcome codependency?
Yes. So I would say, some of the therapeutic approaches that I use that have been helpful is really getting into the core of some of the limiting beliefs, right? The limiting beliefs of I'm not worthy, I'm not enough, I'm not lovable, or they're going to leave me, they're going to abandon me. So these are like deep-rooted core beliefs that no matter what happens, in what situations, even if there's sometimes a healthy relationship, these things can be triggered. So some of my approaches that I've used is very much trauma-informed approaches. I would say like that, really having an understanding that this is not something that just can be healed through CBT or cognitive behavioral therapy. Yes, there are behaviors that can be challenged, thoughts that can be challenged, but you really need to understand where this is coming from. So I would say like any trauma-informed approach, either trauma CBT, EMDR, where we go deep down into these core beliefs and we reframe them, and then we help clients engage in self-soothing, self-regulating, regulating nervous system. So also somatic interventions and approaches have been really helpful. And I would say that strategies or ways to look at it is really focusing on improve, like really working on the self-esteem, right? Mm-hmm. Working on the self-confidence, on self-worth, and learning about attachment styles. I would say this is also another part, because that is also very much connected to how you navigate relationships. Yeah. So I would say that's a big part. And also assertive communication skills, learning to set boundaries. Mm-hmm.
For sure. And are there any specific resources or self-help tools that you'd like to recommend that will help couples or maybe even individuals in general learn more about this?
I would say there's a couple of books that I can recommend. One of them is Attached, and it talks about the new science of adult attachment and how it can help your relationship with yourself, but also your relationship with others. Another book is Women Who Love a Lot. And it also focuses on healing codependency, understanding the signs, understanding where it might come from, your experiences, but finding support, a support network that can support you. So I would say I would recommend those. And I would say seeking support, like understanding that you're not alone in this process, that other people are also experiencing this and are struggling, and that you can get professional help, right? Either individual therapy and also couples therapy.
Mm-hmm. Those are some great recommendations. Thank you so much, Cynthia, for running us through that. Now we're moving on to the open mic section, and this is your chance to talk about whatever it is that you're passionate about. And it doesn't have to be related to the topic. I'm hoping that you'll talk about your cats a little bit. So the floor is yours. Take it away.
Okay. Well, I would say, of course, psychology is something that I'm super passionate about, helping others and building healthy relationships is something that I'm super passionate about too. Healing, all things healing and manifesting. These are things that I love. And I'm always reading up about and listening to podcasts. Entrepreneurship is a big part of my journey and something that I love, talking to other people and learning more about myself as well. And definitely my cats, for sure.
What are your cats' names?
So Neo is my male orange tabby, and then Bella, she is the calico. She's a female cat. And
are there any plans to get more cats?
I was thinking about that today. I would love to. I was thinking of getting a dog. Me and my husband, we want to get a dog, but honestly, I think we're not there yet. We definitely, it's a lot more responsibility. Cats, for sure. Cats, they stay home. They don't need a lot, but I would say maybe in the future.
Yeah, because I mean, dogs and cats, they look so cute together when they, start seeing each other as family. It's the cutest thing. See all the videos on the interwebs about these dogs and cats and just love it so much. But you're right, dogs are a huge commitment. I feel because I have friends who have dogs too, and they spent easily the first few years trying to toilet train their dog, and my cat or any of my friends' cats just learned it the moment they were born. It's kind of it's a huge
wild.
Difference. It's wild. When do you think you might be ready for a dog? Do you think you'll get a cat first and then a dog?
Yeah, I think we might get another cat.
You're raising a whole farm.
Yeah. I love cats. I think, I wasn't really into cats until my husband, he got me into cats. And then the story of how we adopted, we were trying to look for cats, right, in adoption centers. They required a big, long process, which is necessary, and I totally agree. But I think I had a friend who got 2 cats, I think from the same litter, and I asked her, where did you get your cats or your kittens? And then she gave me the number, and I called, and she was like, yeah, I have 2 more. And she showed me a picture, and they were so cute. They were little kittens, so cute. And then my husband and I went to look for them, and we went to get them. So they were also I think stray cats, from a farm. And I was like, we'll take them. We'll take them together.
That's an adorable story. And I must say that you guys are brave for adopting 2 cats at once for your first go at having cats. So that's amazing. Maybe we'll see some, I don't know, Cynthia's little farm in San Francisco or something in the near future. Thank you so much, Cynthia, for joining us today. It's been a pleasure talking to you and learning more about codependency and what it takes to break out of that cycle. If our listeners want to find out more about you and what you do, where can they go?
They can go on Instagram or TikTok, and they can go at Cynthia Flores, LMFT, or they can go to my website, cynthiagflores.com.
Amazing. We'll link those in the show notes. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Reloscope, the Relationship Science Insights podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. For more episodes like this from 10 different life management perspectives, search LMSL on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts, so you can get updated on everything we have to offer. We have a wide range of topics readily available for you to check out. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating our show, sharing it, and subscribing to our channel, as it helps us grow and bring you more quality resources. More of our work can be found on our website at re.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Marie Stella. Thanks for tuning in.